Hello, my name is Zane Perkins, and I'm one of the newest team members here at SIBI because my wife and I have just returned from 17 years of work on the mission field in Santiago, Chile. God has been so good to us over the years, and this morning I get to share with you just a few of the things that He has taught us over those years. I pray that they will be a blessing to you and they will encourage you as we face this trial time. Over the last 5 years in our time in Chile, I had the opportunity to be the director of the Study Abroad program for the Lipscomb University. Students would come and spend a semester living in Chile, and we would travel as part of that experience. Chile has one of the most beautiful southern regions, and only 5% of the world's population will ever go to Torres del Paine. As the director, I had the privilege and the opportunity to go at least 10 times to this wonderful place. Every semester, we would take a group and travel to Torres del Paine in southern Chile, which is an awe-inspiring place with huge 900-foot granite mountains jetting out of the earth, towering over pristine gray and blue lakes. Streams and rivers fed by glaciers irrigate the untouched landscape. It has got to be my favorite place in all the world to enjoy God's creation. We would walk for miles through the park, enjoying every aspect of God's creation. We experienced every climate you can imagine. Summertime heats in the 80s, winter times low with snow and ice. Peaceful, calm days without wind. And other times the winds would be sustained at 40 to 50 miles an hour. Some days not a cloud in the sky to shade us from the sun, and other days the clouds were so thick you couldn't even see the mountains. The weather there was very unpredictable, and they have a motto that says, in Torres del Paine, you can experience all 4 seasons in one day, no matter what the season or time of year. It's a crazy and bizarre place, but so beautiful. I never really believed the 4 seasons myth till a few years ago. We woke up at the hostel on a cold and rainy day. We had come all this way with these college students that were not about to be defeated by a little bit of rain. Everyone dressed up as warm as they could, and they gathered up their rain gear and put it on and headed out for our 15-mile hike. The mountains surrounding the hostel were hidden from view by the cloud cover, and you could barely see the lake. As we started the hike, the temperature was not too bad, but that was short-lived. As we walked further away from the shelter, the temperature began to drop, and the wind picked up. It took about 30 minutes for our rain gear to be soaked beyond its capacity, and the clothes that were underneath to keep us warm were soaked as well. The rain turned to sleet, and the wind pushed this sleet-rain mixture in a horizontal trajectory instead of its normal vertical pattern. It became such a miserable hike that it was jokingly nicknamed the Death March. After 5 miles, the guide decided to turn around and head back to the shelter. I still, to this day, don't know the reasons for turning back, because he was cold, tired, and exhausted, or he was just fed up with all these invincible college students complaining about having been beaten down by nature. The hike back to the shelter was one of defeat, heads held low, looking only at the ground where you put your feet, because the wind and the rain made it impossible for us to look up. We walked slowly, trying to avoid being blown off our feet by the wind. Finally, after about 6 hours in these conditions, the group returned to the hostel, soaked to the bone, initial stages of hypothermia, demoralized and beaten down by their situation. Quarantined inside the hostel because of the storm raging outside, they hunkered down near a fireplace, and the group tried to make sense of their disappointment. During that time, the group began to share their thoughts. It brought about a time of prayer, praise, and adoration to God for the experience. After about 2 hours in that inner room, gathered around a fireplace, someone came in and excitedly said, "You've got to see the sunset outside. It's so beautiful." Begrudgingly and in disbelief, the group made their way outside to see one of the most beautiful sunsets they had ever seen. The storm was gone, and God had replaced it with a gorgeous sunset. We could see the mountains towering above us, clear blue sky, and the beautiful lakes that had escaped our view. The wind was gone and the temperature was comfortable. Those things were always there, but we were unable to see them because of the storm. What a beautiful thing to see after a storm, even though the next day the storm would return with vengeance. The students and I were taught a wonderful and valuable lesson that day, and I will never forget it. In the misery, there is tons of beauty. Today, as a people, a brotherhood, a country, and a world, we are facing a great storm. There are people getting sick with the painful virus that is taking the lives of many. We are trapped in our houses as we self-quarantine, which means for some, students are stuck at home doing school online. Some college students didn't even have the chance to say goodbye to their friends before their universities closed down. Others, unable to participate in those special moments such as graduation, which is the culmination of years of work. Workers find themselves working from home, but not being able to be fully successful because of the limitations put upon them. Many are not at work because the places they work are closed down. Essential personnel are still working, even though the threat of contamination and infection is high and stressful. Others are dealing with difficulties trying to balance family life and work life without the proper space to do so. Some are sick and cannot get out. Others are filling our ICUs, having been tested and shown symptoms of the coronavirus. Many have lost loved ones because of this pandemic, and many will follow. It is a pretty desperate situation. People are beaten down by the epidemic. It seems like a situation in which hope is lost. We begin to feel stuck in the storm that is surrounding us. I'm not sure where you find yourself at this moment, but it is not a hopeless situation. It may be beyond our control, but we serve a God who is much bigger than the current state we find ourselves in. The last few days, we have been encouraged through the words of godly men. They have walked through a portion of Paul's letter to the Philippians. I'm going to be finishing out this week in these devotionals this week by looking at Philippians chapter 4, 10 through 13. Paul wraps up this letter to the Philippian brethren, and I believe we see Paul's heart as we read about him in this unfavorable situation. When Paul writes to the Philippian brethren, we find himself in prison. He appears that he has been there for a while. Historical sources would probably show that he is somewhat alone. It appears his companion Luke may not be with him. And somewhere in the chronology of the story, Philippi, the church that was with him from the beginning, had lessened their support for him. But their support has been renewed, and Epaphroditus was sent to him with a gift for Paul. But even in that, Paul's situation was stressful because Epaphroditus got sick and almost died. But before his visit, he may have been down. But after his visit, as he returns this letter with Epaphroditus and returns this letter sent to the Philippian brethren, we see a new Paul and is renewed in his resolve. Turn with me to Philippians chapter 4, verse 10. I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low and know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I think Paul gives us 3 simple things we can do to help us navigate this difficult and trying time that we find ourselves in. The first one, he says, is that we can change our focus. We can rejoice. As a human being, Paul's difficulty may have caused him to get down. It may have caused him to feel that no one cares for him. He might have even been wondering why he was still imprisoning and suffering. But after Paul's visit from Epaphroditus, he realizes that there were other people who cared for him. He rejoices for others that his circumstances was bringing about God's work in the lives of other people. The Philippians were renewing their love for Paul by providing for his needs. He felt renewed hope in God's care for him through other people. Paul changed his view from his situation to look out to those around him. As we were walking in the rain in Torres del Paine and only looking down at our feet, we find that in this uncertainty of the worldwide epidemic, we often do the same. We focus on me. We focus on my problem, my situation, my shelter in place, and we forget to focus on the much bigger picture. God is still at work in our lives, in the lives of his church, and in the lives of the people who need to hear about him. We can rejoice because we are not alone, and others also are having to struggle through these circumstances. And we can also rejoice because others care about us, and we need to learn to care about others. So praise God and be glad and rejoice that God is giving us these opportunities and the opportunities around us to be with family, to slow down our schedules, and rest and reconnect with friends at a distance and enjoy relying on each other in these moments of need. The second thing we see that I think Paul calls us to is to open our eyes. Open those eyes bright. Paul says that he has learned to use the trials as an opportunity to learn. He has learned to be content. I read that contentment is a state of mind which one's desires are confined to his lot in life, or lot in wherever he finds himself at that point, whatever it may be. I thought it was an interesting definition, but it rings pretty true. When we learn to focus our desires on where God has us at this time, we can learn not to worry about food, or wealth, or prestige, or finances, or whatever amount of toilet paper we think we might need. It is not just about becoming depressed. It's not about looking down in this bad situation, but it's understanding that life is more than the things around us. Paul learned that the secret was not being brought low, suffering in prison, or stoning, or beating. Paul learned that the situation of having an abundance and having everything he wanted was not the secret. The secret was not in food or even toilet paper that we may think we need. The secret was not in having not to go hungry, or being able to go out to eat anytime we want, or to struggle with paying the bills because our job had closed down. That was not the secret. We often, when we live in abundance and without trials and tribulation, we don't reflect on ourselves and learn about ourselves very often. But when things don't go the way we planned, and when things are out of our control, we learn so much about who we are. We learn where we put our trust. Where do we get our self-worth? Where do we find our security? Where do we put our joy? What are we afraid of? What kinds of things keep us from God? What makes us feel good about ourselves? These are things we learn in difficult times. So we can look at this time as a time to learn. Learn about ourselves, learn about others. Think of this moment as a special gift from God to learn how to accommodate ourselves to every situation of life. Learn how to carry an equal temper of mind through all stages of life. This is an opportunity to learn and to focus on where we need to improve in our lives and where we need to grow so that we can avoid the temptations of Satan. Learning to be content in circumstances you will find yourself, and you will have peace, and you will have understanding. The third thing we see that is we need to rely on God. Paul reminds the brethren that the strength of enduring the situation was focus. Focus on the fact that God is the source of my power, not me, myself, or I. Every situation we find ourselves does not rely on our ability, but relies on God's power and strength. God is always there. He is always our strength. He is the power for us to overcome each and every situation. He says something similar in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. He says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with temptation, he will provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it." The third thing that the text teaches is as we face this situation, whether it be because we tested positive for COVID-19 and we're struggling with our physical health, whether we're dealing with loved ones who are suffering, whether we are putting up with the kids that are driving us crazy because we're stuck in the same house, or whether we're putting up with our husband who is with us all the time, we're trying to put up to provide for our basic needs and dealing with those emotions that come from seeing empty shelves at the supermarket. Christ is the power to overcome, not the government, not your company, not your ability to beat the person to the store. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me denotes the present and continuous act. Another way we could say this is through Christ who is strengthening me and does continually strengthen me. It is by his constant and renewing strength that I am able to act in everything. I wholly depend upon him for my spiritual power. What a relief. 3 simple things that Paul tells us that he learned in his life through suffering. The experts say that the COVID-19 virus and pandemic is not going away anytime soon, that we need to be ready to hang in there. I believe that as disciples of Jesus Christ, if we listen to Paul and change our focus and learn to rejoice in trials, open our eyes to learn what God is teaching us about ourselves and about others, and we learn to rely on God by drawing from his strength, we will not only endure and be at peace, but this will be a time that we'll see his church grow. In the early days of the church, there was great trials and persecution. As we read the story in Acts, we can understand that trials and difficult situations are explosive moments for the kingdom. In Acts 2, chapter 46 through 47, it says, "And day by day, attending the temple and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved." We see that the church's response to the trial gave those around them awe of God, and God added to their number. This is a moment in time that we as people of God can prepare a way for God to add to his numbers daily. He will give us a chance to see some of the most beautiful things we have ever seen. God will show us some of the most gorgeous spiritual sunsets this world has ever seen because his people are rejoicing, focused, and relying on God. Be encouraged today that the Lord will use this time to bring others to him as we as his people respond to this trial in a way that brings glory to his name. May God bless you.